Imagine being a young woman far from home, thrust into a world of power, danger, and intrigue, with the fate of your entire people resting on your shoulders. This was Esther's reality, a Jewish orphan who became a queen and faced a choice that would test her courage to the core. Her story, found in the Book of Esther, is a gripping tale of faith, bravery, and God's unseen guidance in the face of impossible odds. It's a story that speaks to anyone who's ever felt afraid to stand up, speak out, or step into a moment that feels bigger than themselves. If you're wrestling with fear or wondering if you have what it takes to follow God's call, Esther's journey will inspire you to find courage and trust in His plan. Let's dive into this remarkable story and discover how God uses ordinary people to do extraordinary things. Our story begins in the opulent Persian Empire, in the grand capital of Susa, where King Xerxes ruled over a vast kingdom. The Jewish people, scattered in exile, lived quietly among the Persians, their identity often hidden to avoid trouble. Among them was Esther, a young Jewish girl named Hadassah, raised by her cousin Mordecai after her parents' death. Esther was beautiful, but more than that, she was kind, humble, and deeply rooted in her faith, thanks to Mordecai's guidance. One day, King Xerxes, after banishing his queen for disobedience, launched a search for a new bride. Young women from across the empire were brought to the palace, and Esther was among them, taken from her simple life to compete in a royal beauty contest. Mordecai urged her to hide her Jewish identity, and she obeyed, winning favor with everyone she met. After months of preparation, Esther stood before the king. Her grace and charm captivated Xerxes, and he chose her as his queen, placing a crown on her head. From orphan to royalty, Esther's life had changed overnight, but God's plan for her was just beginning. Meanwhile, a dark shadow loomed. Haman, the king's arrogant advisor, rose to power and demanded that everyone bow to him. Mordecai, loyal to God alone, refused, sparking Haman's rage. When Haman learned Mordecai was Jewish, his hatred grew into a genocidal plot. He convinced Xerxes to issue a decree. On a set day, every Jew in the empire, man, woman, and child, would be killed and their possessions seized. The decree spread like wildfire, and the Jewish people wept in despair, their lives hanging by a thread. Mordecai, grieving in sackcloth, sent word to Esther in the palace. She must go to the king and plead for her people. But there was a catch. Approaching the king uninvited was punishable by death unless he extended his golden scepter. Esther hadn't been summoned in 30 days, and revealing her Jewish identity could seal her fate. Fear gripped her heart. She sent a message to Mordecai, hesitating. Anyone who approaches the king without being called faces death. Mordecai's response was piercing. Do not think that because you are in the king's house, you alone of all the Jews will escape. If you remain silent, relief and deliverance will come from another place, but you and your father's family will perish. And who knows but that you have come to your royal position for such a time as this. Esther 4:13-14. Those words lit a spark in Esther's soul. She saw God's hand in her unlikely rise to queen, not by chance, but by divine purpose. Esther made her choice. She called for a fast, asking Mordecai and the Jews of Susa to pray and fast with her for 3 days. When this is done, she said, I will go to the king, even though it is against the law. And if I perish, I perish. Esther 4:16. Her words weren't defeatist. They were a surrender to God's will, a bold act of courage rooted in faith. After 3 days of prayer, Esther put on her royal robes, her heart pounding, and walked into the king's court. The throne room was silent, the air thick with tension. Xerxes sat on his throne, his eyes on Esther. Would he raise the scepter, or would her life end? Then a miracle. Xerxes smiled, extended the scepter, and welcomed her. "What is your request, Queen Esther?" he asked. "Even up to half the kingdom, it will be given you." Esther, guided by wisdom, didn't blurt out her plea. Instead, she invited the king and Haman to a banquet, then to a second one, building suspense and softening Xerxes' heart. At the second banquet, with wine flowing and the mood warm, Esther seized her moment. "My king," she said, her voice steady, "if I have found favor with you, spare my life and the lives of my people. We have been sold to be destroyed, killed, and annihilated." Shocked, Xerxes demanded, "Who dares do this?" Esther pointed to Haman. "This vile Haman!" The king's fury erupted. Haman had deceived him, plotting genocide behind his back. Xerxes ordered Haman hanged on the very gallows he'd built for Mordecai, and the decree was reversed. A new edict allowed the Jews to defend themselves, and on the appointed day they triumphed, saved by Esther's courage. Mordecai was elevated to Haman's position, and the Jews celebrated their deliverance, a victory still commemorated today in the Feast of Purim. Esther, once a timid orphan, became a heroine, her faith and bravery a testament to God's guidance. The Book of Esther never mentions God's name, yet his presence is undeniable, orchestrating events, softening hearts, and empowering a young woman to change history. What does Esther's story mean for us? It's a call to courage, a reminder that God places us where we are for such a time as this. Maybe you're facing a moment that demands bravery, speaking truth, standing up for what's right, or stepping into a role you feel unqualified for. Esther shows us that courage isn't the absence of fear. It's trusting God through the fear. She didn't act alone. She leaned on prayer, community, and God's timing. Her story also reminds us that God's guidance is often unseen, working behind the scenes to fulfill his purpose. Here's my challenge. This week, identify one area where God might be calling you to be courageous. Is it forgiving someone, sharing your faith, or taking a stand? Like Esther, start with prayer, maybe even a day of fasting, and seek support from a friend or community. Write down Mordecai's words, "for such a time as this," and let them remind you that God has placed you here for a purpose. Take one brave step, trusting God to guide the outcome. Let's close with a promise from Isaiah 41:10. "So do not fear, for I am with you. Do not be dismayed, for I am your God. I will strengthen you and help you." That's the God who guided Esther, and he's guiding you. Step out in faith, be bold, and let his courage shine through you. You were made for such a time as this,